So, wow, it's a big group. It's amazing to have you here in our second house. We're just opening this one here at the heart of all evil in the financial district. That is very exciting. So, I am beyond inspired to have Deepak Chopra in the house, particularly talking about evolution or extinction, because that is a topic that is very close to my heart. So I want to steal no more than 5 minutes to share with you why. But first I want to thank Susanna, because Susanna, Choe, hi Susanna, she's been doing amazing work, and she put all this together in such a beautiful way. And then I want to thank you all for really being here, guys. It's really inspiring to see how there is incredible people who believe that there is more to us than what we see. So here is the story, As many of you know, I was diagnosed with stage 3 metastatic melanoma 7 years ago. And I'm a real estate developer. And, I was very intellectual and secular, and whatever I couldn't touch didn't exist for me. And whatever, scientifically speaking, I couldn't validate simply didn't matter. And there I was with no answers to my demise. So I had to venture into the unknown, and that took shape in the form of ayahuasca sessions deep in the jungle in Peru. And what I had was this series of amazing mystical experiences that now are kind of becoming mainstream, which is an amazing thing. And what I saw, summarizing it in the unknown, how I like to call it, is that effectively there was a different expression of myself, an inner expression of myself, a higher expression of myself, however you want to call it. That it was like a anterior creation. It was like a journey of remembrance. It was amazing to see how the exploration of the unknown that I was so afraid of was this journey of comfort and coming back to a place that I didn't know there was, and yet I had always been there. So with that change in my baseline reality, I also felt that it was so much more real than this version of reality too. And when I was enjoying this objective point of view of what I understood reality to be before that, I could see how there was all-encompassing love, compassion, kindness, and that sense of familiarity, that I had never truly experienced before, and how we were truly all interconnected together as one. And yet, I was able to maintain my own identity while being there. And then I saw, observing back, at what was my secular upbringing, and that set of consensual beliefs that I called reality, because I believe that reality is nothing more than the stories that we decide to tell to each other, had to be recontextualized, had to be changed. I saw how it was in collapse. I saw how what we understand to be reality was transforming into something beautiful, and how the anxiety that we feel in the world, that is the basis for the epidemic of mental health and depression and anxiety that we try to explain in individual terms because we always think that there's something wrong with us, it was truly something that was collective, and yet that anxiety was just one of transitioning to something beautiful, like a caterpillar going into a butterfly, so that we had nothing to fear. And when we saw that potential disruption in the system as we understand it today, I felt very compelled, to make a choice. And the choice that I had to make was one of potentially removing myself from my addiction to secular validation and start experiencing knowledge through my own journey, changing our addiction to scientific proven validation for one of experiential knowledge, you know, so that we realize that we're masters of self-limitation and that there's so much more out there to who we are. And when we started potentially doing that, we realized that we weren't the only ones, and that there were others like us, and that effectively through consensual belief in changing the way we relate with oneself and the way we relate with others, moving away from that individual interest at the expense of the collective interest, we could potentially commit with that extraordinary version of myself that I didn't know I have, but that now I saw. And if we do that, we can then potentially change the relationship with others by practicing devotion for those in the pursuit of the extraordinary, so that we could transcend the forgetting of the forgetting, which is the nemesis, and remember that we forgot who we truly are. And to conclude potentially that this that is happening right now is not random or by any sort of chance, and that we potentially may have known each other and that we're coming together for a specific purpose. So thank you very much for being here, guys. And with you, I welcome Susanna, who is going to be doing the introduction to Deepak and the rest of the fabulous panel that we have. Thank you very, very much.
Wow. Hi, everyone. This is the most packed I've ever seen the assemblage. How special this is to have all of you here. Thank you for watching, for those of you who are on Facebook Live, and thank you all for joining us tonight. So, the assemblage is the perfect place to host this event, considering that I consider it the consciousness hub of New York City, and especially in a place like right by Wall Street. I think as we think about monetary systems and the evolution of humanity and creating exponential technology such as AI and blockchain, it's really important that we wake up and become more conscious, because technology is just an evolution of our consciousness. And so I would love to introduce everyone here tonight. We have Deepak Chopra, Anahita Moghaddam, and Moghaddam. I'll let them introduce themselves, but I'd consider Deepak the meditation guru and pioneer of integrative medicine and personal development. Anahita, my life coach, feminine guru, and founder of Neural Beings, chief mindfulness officer of a company called Y2X. And I'll let you explain more about that. Moghaddam, the former chief business officer at Google X, where they built self-driving cars and AI and robots. And then he recently left to pursue his mission to make 1 billion people happier worldwide, after writing a book called Solve for Happy. So I wanted to start with why you chose this topic. When I had invited you to come speak here with Mo, you suggested that we talk about the future of humanity, extinction, or evolution, and also for you all to explain your version of what evolution means and the lens in which you look at evolution through. And and we'll start with Deepak.
I'd rather learn from you more and from you. I met Susanna at the blockchain conference, and she asked me to come here, and she asked me to choose a topic, and I kind of just rattled off the first thought that came to my mind. There was no plan behind that. But I do feel that unless we understand what is reality, we are looking at extinction, the human species, with all that's going on, climate change, ethnocentrism, racism, bigotry, hatred, war, prejudice, terrorism, eco-destruction, poison in the food chain, mechanized death, artificial intelligence, looking at diabolical technologies for destruction. Right now we're looking at weaponized AI as well. So it's not a good situation. The human species is an experiment by the universe, and experiments can fail. And it might have been a good idea, but maybe it's not. The universe knows how to recreate itself. But I want to learn from Mo and from you, Anahita, and then I'll say what I have to say, whatever comes to my mind.
So thanks for the honor, and I hope to be able to contribute anything to your learning, but if I do, that would be a pleasure. Thank you all for coming. This is wonderful. Yeah, I share the view. I mean, when Deepak wrote back and said evolution or extinction, I was like, very good question. In my mind, actually, I almost have an answer if you want, but definitely it has never been as pivotal in the history of humanity as it is today. We are at a point at which, if we don't make a choice, we're in a bad place. It's as simple as that. And so I'll try to share with you my view of this very openly today. I hope that we can get as many questions and conversations as we can. As Susanna has mentioned, I used to be the chief business officer of Google X, and I worked at Google for 11 years, opened half of Google's presence worldwide. And so I know this world from the inside really, really well. I also, surprisingly, when they did those HR profiling charts and so on, I always happen to be exactly that center. So I may come across when I talk to you today as a hyper engineer. You know, my voice may make you think that I'm a man, but I'm honestly in the dead center between EQ and IQ, between really emotional intelligence and really spirituality and all of the other parts of it. So because of the events of my life, I ended up prioritizing for the first time in my life, when my wonderful son Ali left our world, I ended up prioritizing my right side. I ended up prioritizing my heart for the first time in my life. And that journey has been 3.5 years now. I cannot tell you how timely it is to understand where we are in the world and where our world is going and how much this is needed now, because unfortunately it's not a priority. So maybe you can start with introducing you.
Okay. So I just have to say, first of all, my wonderful partner Mo is fasting. So he has not had a drop of water or a single bite of anything to eat all day. So in half an hour he's going to have a date and a sip of water.
These are the only dates I'm allowed.
And no, seriously, respect and blessings. The second thing I want to say is very important. I feel really good sandwiched between Deepak Chopra and Moghaddam. This is really, ladies, this is the place to be. I kind of don't want to talk about evolution right now, but okay. Seriously, I don't want to talk. What am I supposed to say? Well, so my name is Anahita. I was born in Iran, unfortunately. You're supposed to laugh. And I grew up in Germany and went through my share of suffering and developmental issues. And agony and confusion, and eventually ended up in New York with a coaching practice called Neural Beings. And I work with people who want to do good in the world, but oftentimes haven't yet developed the inner resources to become those altruistic heroes. In Buddhism, we would call them bodhisattvas, beings who dedicate their entire life, all of their body, speech, and mind actions, karmas, to doing good in the world, oftentimes foregoing their own needs for the sake of others. So those are the people that I dedicate my life and commit to serving. So this is why I have the pleasure and the honor to be on this stage, though I really have nothing to say in comparison to these teachers.
That's not true.
Okay. So, evolution or extinction? What is evolution? Evolution is a process of change. Everything is in a constant state of flux and change. Whether it's heading in the positive or negative direction depends on how we perceive it. I don't know if there is any self-existent bad or any self-existent good that things are moving towards. It all depends. Everything depends on how we relate to this process. And like you were saying, if we engage, if we act in a way that's in alignment with the goal we seek, and if our goal is happiness, which I believe every sentient being seeks happiness, seeks freedom from suffering. So if our actions correspond with this desired outcome, then we are practicing wisdom and we are evolving. If we want to be happy and free and our actions are producing unhappiness and more confusion and more ignorance, then we are degenerating or we are subject to whatever the opposite of evolution is. Extinction, right. So I think it's simple. That's what I would say.
Okay, so let's get into the topic. So these were introductions. Yeah. So when I was presented with the question, thanks to Deepak, I basically thought about it as an annoying engineer. That's what I always do. So to get an answer to is it evolution or extinction, the first thing you do as an engineer is to define what is evolution and what is extinction. So in reality, evolution is actually is a word that's really misused by science. It gives you some connotations to it that are not entirely true. So it seems to us that evolution is unidirectional. It seems to us that evolution is progress, right? But evolution is not always progress. As a matter of fact, evolution, if you really look at the scientific definition, is a process by which we adapt to our environment. Natural selection is what makes it progress sometimes, by getting rid of the ones that don't fit the new environment. The challenge we have is that sometimes we evolve. We, as beings, by the way, not just humans, we evolve to fit a certain environment, and then the environment changes. And when it changes, that's when the threat happens. Now, I want us to get to a definition of the reality of where we are. Deepak mentioned, at a high level, where we are as humanity. So, and I want us to really think, is this progress or not? Are we advancing at all? And truly, that's an interesting question coming from the Chief Business Officer of Google X. Are we advancing at all? Right? Now, just take some facts. Between the time we started and now, there must have been somewhere around 10,000 animals slaughtered in the US. There is 10 billion animals a year that are being slaughtered in this country to feed a few hundred million people, right? Many of which are not eating enough of that food to start, right? There are 30 billion modern-day slaves. There are 786 million people in the world, as we stand today, that do not have access to this. They don't have access to drinking water. That's why I fast, by the way, just so that you understand how those people feel, right? There are so many people in our world today that are unhappy. 1 of every 4 people in the world today is, in the modern world, in the Western world, is clinically depressed. This is a person that has gone through so much suffering that they've gone to the point where they went and got diagnosed and then were diagnosed clinically depressed. That doesn't count the others that are unhappy that you meet every day. Do we call that advancement? Have we done really well? How many of us have an iPhone 10 in our pocket and are still waiting for the iPhone 12, right? How many of us are really engaging with life every day with a messed up definition of almost everything that is meaningful or worthy in life? And in reality, if you think of it this way, the question is, have we evolved? Are we really evolving? If this is evolving, right? Is this the way, if we extrapolate this forward, will we become better beings, or worse being powered by more and more technology? And the reality of the matter is, if you ask me, we're not evolving at all. As a matter of fact, is there an opposite English word to the word evolved? I don't know. It's devolved, right? Yeah, we're devolving and compensating for our decline, demise, if you want, with more machines and more technologies and more distractions and more parties and more drinks and more everything, right? We're in a very, very, very critical place of humanity for a very interesting reason, that as we continue to move on that path, the environment is changing. And the environment is changing so drastically that suddenly you start to realize, no, there is something that needs to be taken in charge now. And I think we're going to cover 3 different concepts of this, but my concept is very straightforward. My concept is, from a technology point of view, I've contributed to building most of the technologies that you have today, whether it's mobile or personal computing or whatever. I was at the right place at the right time. For some reason, I don't know why I was chosen for that, right? And each of those came with a promise. And the promise was to make us better. But each of those ended up delivering what? Delivering more greed, more competitiveness, more illusions in our lives. To be quite honest, most of what we have, we don't need. So anything more than this $19 t-shirts, you don't need, right? But that's not the problem. The problem is, as Susanna started, we are at a pivotal point of technology where technology is going to take over. And I don't think people realize that. So the reality is AI is out of the box. The reality is that AI happened already. It's just a matter of time. There are predictions of 15 to 20 years, right? Make them 25 if you want. But we are at a point where artificial intelligence is going to be better than human intelligence within 10 to 15 to 20, 25 years. They call that point singularity. And at singularity, the smartest being on the face of the planet, it depends on how you want to define being, is not going to be us. Okay? And when the smartest being is not us, who's going to solve all the problems? The machines. What are they going to solve the problems using? They're going to solve the problems using intelligence. But what target will they have to solve the problem? Where will they assign themselves the target? Based on values. And the values they're learning from us. And so they are learning from us greed, competitiveness, hate, disregard for the environment, disregard for each other, disregard for our own self, our own being, right? They're learning from us the worst of humanity. And they're learning just like 18-month infants. So what they're doing is they're looking at the information around them, and they're seeing our behaviors as their parents and mimicking them. Literally, if I explain it to you, it's pattern recognition. It's like an 18-month-old infant. Now, if you ask me, where will that lead? It will lead, as a game theorist, to a definitive extinction of this species, this that we've become. We have one of 2 choices. One is to change and make this version of us extinct, because honestly, this version of us is not great, right? Or they will make us extinct. They will choose. You will tell them, fix global warming. They'll say, sure, you're the problem. I'll get rid of you, right? Think about it. Now that to me, truly, and I'll hand over for more comments, that to me truly is a pivotal point in the history of humanity. Because for the first time ever, you and me and everyone in this room and everyone in this city and everyone on this planet is responsible. Because if every one of us starts to change, the whole world will change. It's no longer the power of Donald Trump or the power of Larry Page or the power of Mark Zuckerberg. It's our behaviors as humans, as a collective consciousness, if you want. If we change, the entire future will change. And this bad version of us will be extinct. If we don't, it's the same. But it's a much more painful process. So that's my current position on the conversation.
Thank you. Wow. really such an honor to have been working on this project with Mo, and it's fascinating how this has kind of come full circle, and that I ran into you at this blockchain conference produced by a company where I used to work, and it's a tech company, a blockchain company, and to be honest, I was very depressed at one point while I was working there, and I totally lost sense of myself, and got really disconnected to myself, to other people, how I wanted to show up in the world, what I wanted to stand for. And during that time period, Anahita lived down the hallway, and her home became my sanctuary, where I got to tap into who I truly am. And after the company and I parted ways, I invited Anahita to come speak at an event series I accidentally started, called The Alchemy of Connection, to teach people in New York City about the importance of connection to self, to other, and the world. Unfortunately, she couldn't make it to that one because she got caught with a stomach bug, but then she came to the next one in February because it was such a successful event. Everyone in New York City are starving for more connection, which I had realized during that event. And you came and spoke about your perspective of love and your feminine wisdom. So I would love for you to share with the audience your perspective on that, and distinguish the difference between the left brain and the right brain, and how you're threading the needle between technology and capital and consciousness.
Oh my God, that's a lot. Well, let me just begin with the fact that all of us in this room, as beautiful and as evolved as we may be, we're all suffering. Who's not suffering, please raise your hand. But I would, and it's not my he's not suffering. Well, because he's also who he is, right? Are you kidding?
I don't know.
Say you're kidding.
I don't know.
Well, let's just say we're all plagued by some level of at least dissatisfaction. We all are, I would say, in every moment of our experience, craving something other than what we are and other than what we have. And this impulse keeps us seeking, keeps us needing, keeps us wanting to continuously reify this sense of self and reify this our worldview. And so I'm obsessed with suffering, and to me, as a pessimistic, morbid German Iranian Buddhist, I like to really dig into that, and I don't shy away from it, and I think it's absolutely fucking necessary. Because how else are we going to identify the causes that keep us in this state of perpetual unhappiness and suffering? So we have to really get real. And the reality, as both of them really beautifully illustrated, the reality of our human condition is not looking too good. As much as we can say, well, we have assemblages in the world, and we have blockchain, and we have, iPhones and yoga, and that's wonderful. But if we don't have an understanding of reality, if our fundamental perception of reality is delusional, fundamentally delusional, and we are ascribing meaning to a world that we don't fully understand, and living by that meaning, and perpetuating duality and perpetuating fragmentation. And I don't know if you know David Bohm, the quantum physicist, who speaks so beautifully about fragmentation versus wholeness, and how our fragmented thoughts and our fragmented worldview is now reflected in our world. And we see that. And the other person whose work really inspires me is a psychiatrist from England called Ian McGilchrist, and he wrote a book called The Master and the Emissary. And his thesis is that the world is in a state of despair because of the divide between the left and the right hemispheres of the brain. And if you look at the left and the right hemisphere, they both do the same thing, more or less. The brain, you can't ascribe certain, activities to a single hemisphere. They both are involved in everything, but how they are involved varies. So the left functions differently than the right hemisphere, and he argues that the world we live in, the world that Mo described so clearly, is a world dominated by a left-centric worldview. They say up to 75% of our of our world, of our inhabitants of the world, operate from a left-centric, left-dominant perception of the world. And the left hemisphere, as most of you may know, likes to break everything apart, likes to see things in pieces, and likes to attend to tasks as they come up, and is so focused on that that it misses the bigger picture, and it doesn't have the ability to see the holistic view of things. And if you look at the right hemisphere, and I'm not a trained neuroscientist, I'm sure you have a lot more to say to this, and I would love to learn if you have to add. The right hemisphere likes to have a more holistic understanding, likes to put things into perspective, and is much more relational. So the left sort of sees things fragmented, whereas the right sees things in a holistic and interconnected, interrelated way. And clearly, if we look at how we function, even me as a woman, I'm 35 years old, I still default to left brain dominance. I still don't fully trust, and I say this openly. I mean, I'm doing a lot of work on developing the feminine as we are all emerging and the feminine is rising. I am coming face to face with so many obstacles, so many hindrances to fully. And there's my friend who gave me the book, The Women Who Dance. What is it called? Women Who Run with the Wolves. Right? Dance is even better. Right? So it's like it's like, what do you say? The archaeologists, they dig up the sort of excavating the feminine soul, the feminine psyche. And of course, we say the right brain is more feminine and the left brain is more masculine. I mean, those are just gender categories. Essentially, we all have two hemispheres, hopefully. So the goal is to achieve balance, and that's the whole argument of this wonderful man, Ian McGilchrist, is that we have to have balance. In fact, the master at the moment is the left brain. The left does not trust the right. My own masculine tendencies don't fully allow the feminine to rise. I have to admit, and you might hate me, I don't fully trust my feminine yet. I sit in boardrooms at tech companies. I'm this chief mindfulness officer, that's what they call me there, of this incredible blockchain-based investment firm dedicated to social impact and exponential, returns at the same time, profitability and doing good. But at the same time, I'm sitting there in the boardroom with all these wonderful white men, and I love them to death, but I'm like, they don't really take me seriously, That's the reality. And I have girlfriends who are in this fintech space and so forth, and they are not taken seriously. So that's, like you were saying, it starts with us looking at where do we not trust our own right brains. And I'm dealing with some pretty hyper-masculine men who, yes, are also integrated in some ways, but I'm a coach to executives and CEOs. Most of them are men. And I see how they're not fully comfortable with embracing certain qualities because they're so deeply conditioned to feel shame, to feel mistrust towards the intuitive, towards the perception that sees things as perhaps a little less rigid, a little less fixed. We don't like uncertainty. We like to have everything predictable and certain and fixed. And like Chogyam Trungpa said, the bad news is we're falling, and the good news is there's no ground. So we better get comfortable with the fact that we're all falling. There is no ground. I don't know if I answered your question.
And why is it so important that we do embrace our feminine more in order to evolve in the right direction for humanity?
Well, if we were to just say, okay, feminine, let's leave the gender category and let's just say the functions of the right hemisphere, right? So let's bring the two into balance. In fact, let's make the right the master. And let's send out the left hemisphere to do the work for the master, right? So let's have a more holistic vision of the world and then rely upon our executive functions and the abilities to categorize and systematize and be really kind of sequential. Those are wonderful qualities. And some men ask me, like, are feminists saying we should kick all the men out of the CEO positions? Like, should we just replace men with women? At least that's not what I'm arguing. We need both. We need the left and the right. We need both. We need integration. We need the coming together. And that's so symbolic in a way too, because we are seeking to go to a non-dual understanding of reality. I think you, Deepak, have a lot to say about that non-duality. So in order to achieve non-duality, we have to really embrace duality first.
Great answer. And Deepak, can you explain what duality even is for those people who might
First
not
of
know?
all, First of all, is Rodrigo still here? Are you here, Rodrigo? I just want to acknowledge that what he said about coming home and discovering what is fundamental is really, really the key to our salvation. So I want to thank him for that, and I want to thank Mo for very lucidly explaining why this is a moment of choice and crisis, and Anahita for, I totally agree that our salvation is the embodiment of the divine feminine in everyone, not just women but all of us, males, females, transgender, gay, etc. We all need to embody that divine feminine. I'll talk about suffering in a moment, but let me start with something that may be relevant, or maybe it's not relevant. But I think right now the scientific model of what we call reality is actually in a crisis. So if you go on the internet and you look up, Google open questions in science, and there was a paper in 2008 in the magazine Science that has been recycled since then. There are 125 so-called open questions in science. Open means we don't have the answer. The number one open question in science right now is, what is the universe made of? Okay, so everything is made of something, presumably. And this is made, I think, of plastic. This is made of carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen. What is the universe made of, and why is that an open question? Well, according to the current scientific model, 70% of the universe is this mysterious entity called dark energy, which is also referred to as the cosmological constant. It's actually a mathematical construct which explains the fact, or tries to explain the fact, that the space between galaxies is expanding faster than the speed of light. So right now, as we're speaking, galaxies are tumbling across the cosmic horizon, which is 47 billion light years away from us, into the unknowable. Because by the time light gets from there to here, our solar system will have exhausted its thermonuclear energy and burnt itself up into the heat death of absolute zero. So 70% is this unknowable, or probably unknowable, but definitely unknown entity that we call dark energy. No idea what it is. That leaves 30% of the universe, which is left, of which 26% is another mysterious hypothetical construct called dark matter. What is it? Well, we don't know what it is, except that it's not atomic. It's not made up of atoms. Everything that you see in this room, including your own body, is made up of atoms. So, what is dark matter? We know it's not atomic. It doesn't reflect light, absorb light, emit light, or have any interaction with light. There are again hypothetical candidates for this. The most recent one is something called WIMP, which means weakly interactive massive particle. What it is, it's just a mathematical idea. So you're left with 4% of the universe, which is atomic. Of that, most of it, 99.99%, is invisible interstellar dust, which is also not visible to us. They think it's hydrogen and helium. So the visible universe, which is, according to the current scientific model, 2 trillion galaxies. 2 trillion galaxies, 700 sextillion stars. I don't even know how to write that, okay? Maybe Mo does, you know. But 700 followed by innumerable zeros. The visible universe is 0.01% of what's out there. And what is that? It's made up of atoms, What about atoms? They're made of particles. What about particles? Well, they have a dual nature. So as particles, they have units of mass and energy, but as waves, they exist as possibilities. And if you ask scientists where do they exist, they'll say Hilbert space. You ask them, what is Hilbert space? They'll say it's an infinitely dimensional space, a space with infinite dimensions. You ask them, where is it? It's mathematical. So where is it? The answer you get is shut up and calculate. Okay, so what's the universe made of? The best answer is it's made of nothing. Okay. The best answer so far. But we don't know what that nothingness is. The second open question in science today is, what's the biological basis of consciousness? So right now I'm speaking to you, you're listening to me, because we're all conscious beings, right? And so the question is, how does the brain produce consciousness? Because that's an assumption, that the brain produces consciousness. You knock somebody on the head, they lose consciousness. You give them anesthesia, they lose consciousness or conscious experience. If they're dead, presumably, they're unconscious. But how does the brain produce this experience that we're having right now? You're looking at me. What's coming to your eyes is colorless photons. What's going through your lens is, again, colorless photons. What's happening in your retina? Electrochemistry. What's going to your brain? An electrical current. What's happening in your brain? Neurochemistry. What are you experiencing? This room. You're experiencing your own body, colors, forms, fragrances, textures, smells, sounds, thoughts, emotions, feelings, images, imagination, intention, introspection, intuition. How does the brain do this? Through electrochemistry. That's called the hard problem of consciousness. What's the biological basis? We don't know. Can we see consciousness? We can't. Does it have a form? If it did, we'd be able to see it. But we can't see consciousness, but without it, we can't do the seeing. We can't hear consciousness, but without it, there's no hearing. You can't perceive it, you can't think about it, you can't imagine it, but without that, there's no experience. So we have a problem. We don't know what the universe is made of, and we don't know how we know what we know. It's a huge problem, right? So is there a solution? And I think the solution is that we have created a science, and this is what I wanted to address because of what Rodrigo said in the beginning. We have created a science that is based on a superstition. And that superstition is matter. The physical world is a superstition. What we call matter is the activity that we call perception. Right now, you're perceiving this room, you're perceiving your body, you're perceiving this. It's perception, it's sensory perception, and sensory perception in turn is an activity of consciousness. Is a modification of consciousness. All you actually experience every moment in your life is sensations, images, feelings, thoughts. Period. By sensations, I mean all sense experiences, including sound, form, color, etc. So you experience sensations, images, feelings, emotions, and thoughts. That's it. The rest is a story, including the story that we have something called a body, a mind, and there's a universe. This is a human story, a human construct that we created by inventing language. Okay, so anything that you can use a word for is a human construct. And if I asked you, what's this? You'd say a microphone. What's this? A hand. What's this? A jacket. What's this? A body. Open it up, there you see a heart. These are human constructs for modes of knowing and experience in consciousness, and those modes of knowing are sensations, images, feelings, thoughts, which are modified forms of consciousness. So if I ask you right now, think of a beautiful red sunset on the ocean. You have an experience, right? You can see something. There's no sunset in your brain right now. All there is electrochemistry. Think of the love that you feel for someone. Think of just that and feel that. You feel something? Do you have an experience? All that's happening in your brain is electrochemistry. Okay. Any image you can have, any thought you can have, any perception you can have is a modified form of you. You as a being. So if your ontological primitive, which means if your understanding of the world is that it's physical, then we are screwed. Because it's not physical. Everything that we call physical is actually invisible, non-material, for lack of a better word, consciousness. There's only consciousness. Your body is not the and consciousness means awareness too. So your body is not the container of awareness. Your body is an experience in awareness. Right now you're experiencing your body. And this is not the body you had last year or 10 years ago or when you were a baby or when you were an embryo. So what we call the body is a shifting, intermittent experience in consciousness. What we call the mind is the interpretation of sensory experience. What we call emotions is whether we like it or we don't like it. Period. So once we begin to understand this, it's very empowering to know that you are the creator of your mind, of your body, and that which we call the universe. These are human words for modes of knowing and experience. Go beyond all this. And you can do it right now. As you're listening to me, just be aware of that which is listening. And the presence you feel is you. It's not a thought, which might be saying, I wish I'd gone to the bathroom before the lecture began. The thought is an arising and a subsiding in awareness. So is the perception, so is the image, so is the sensation. All there is awareness, and this awareness has no location in space or time. And so it's not subject to birth or death, which are human constructs based on the idea that I'm a body. But there's no such thing as a body. Your body is an intermittent experience that you're having right now. You call it a body, a human construct. All the other animals in the world that we see, all the sentient beings in the world we see, we gave names to them. Do you think a giraffe knows what that is called a giraffe? Do you think Obama's dog Bo knew he was in the White House, sitting in the Oval Office? Human constructs. Go beyond the constructs, and all that's left is infinite possibilities. All that is left is synchronicity. You mentioned that synchronicity. Everything is inseparably not connected. It's inseparably one. That's what the true singularity is. Where space-time, energy, matter, information, or these are also human constructs, resolve into one being. So singularity, unpredictability, which is, you use that word. Without unpredictability, there would be no creativity. If everything's predictable, what's there to do, right? So unpredictability, synchronicity, all possibilities, the source of intention, attention, and the understanding that in that inseparability, love and compassion and joy are ultimate truths. Love is not a sentiment or an emotion, although it can express itself as that, and it's beautiful, but love is the ultimate truth at the heart of creation. That there's one inseparable being experiencing itself as all of us. So I think there is hope. But beyond that, to be realistic, we have to be beyond hope and despair. we have to be in touch with reality. And once you're in touch with reality, and then the collective is in touch with reality, then the world will change. You know, there's an expression, what seemed like death to a caterpillar, when the caterpillar was thinking the world was coming to an end, it transformed into a butterfly. But we are at that critical stage. Either the caterpillar dies or it transforms into a new experience of the world. And that is possible because of the very things that we are also afraid of, like social media, like the internet, like artificial intelligence. All the things that we are scared of could be actually the way we collectively transform if we have the understanding and the will and the love and the empathy and the joy and the compassion and the deeper understanding. Understanding, what is understanding? The brain doesn't understand anything. It's a mechanical device. You know, the brain is just it's another human construct, the brain. How do you know you have a brain? As a result of sensory experience, right? Which is an activation of consciousness. But I'll shut up right now. I think I've spoken too long. And I just honor my companions here for laying the foundation for a new paradigm. Because unless we have a deeper understanding of truth, you know, you mentioned suffering, and the reason that I just casually raised my hand, but this is the human quest. All religions, all spiritual traditions are based on this desire to alleviate suffering. So if you go to the wisdom tradition, even before Buddhism or Vedanta and non-duality, they talk about human suffering as having 5 causes. Only 5. 5 kleshas, they're called in Sanskrit. The first is not knowing what reality is, not knowing your own self. The second is grasping the ungraspable. Now, what does that mean? If I asked you what happened to your childhood, it's gone. If I asked you what happened to last year, it's gone. But if I asked you what happened to this morning, it's gone. What happened to 5 minutes ago, it's gone. What happened to a minute ago, it's gone. What happens to these words by the time you hear them? They don't exist. That's why Wittgenstein, the German philosopher, he said, our life is a dream. We are asleep, but once in a while we wake up enough to know that we are dreaming. So this is a lucid dream. What we're trying to do right now is upgrade this lucid dream. Because that's all we have, the lucid dream. But experience by itself is ungraspable. And that leads to the fear of impermanence, which is the third cause of suffering. The fourth is identifying with a human construct called the ego, or the self, this ego self, which says, there's me and there's the rest of the universe. This is as soon as you're born. You know, we come into an interpreted world. That world has been interpreted for us for 50,000 years, ever since we started using words, language. So the world is already interpreted for you. You are male, you are female, you are Indian, you are Canadian, you are born in a Hindu family or a Jewish family or a Muslim family, and then the rest of your life you keep reinforcing these constructs. And then based on these constructs that I am a skin-encapsulated ego squeezed into the volume of a body and the span of a lifetime, we create other constructs, birth, death. See how we've created the whole rigmarole of fear of impermanence, ego identity, and then finally the fear of death. All these are the causes of human suffering: old age, infirmity, death. But unless we go to the first cause, not knowing who we are, not knowing the true self, which masquerades as this, there's no solution to human suffering. Okay, but once you go there and you feel at the level of being. That's why feeling is so important, because people say they make rational decisions, but we don't even know what a thought is. We talk about rationality. Can anyone explain a thought? I asked Michael Shermer, the arch skeptic in the world today, I said, what's a thought? He said, it's an electrochemical activity in the brain. I said, now that statement itself is a thought, right? An electrochemical activity. Are you telling me that an electrochemical activity in the brain has existential dilemmas? You see, we have the wrong paradigm. And that paradigm is, as I said, the superstition of matter. We are conscious beings. Evolution means spontaneous creativity that comes from the experience of love, period. And love as the ultimate truth. And then everything is spontaneous. That's evolution. The opposite of evolution is entropy and disappearing into the black hole of singularity.
So, why meditation? How does meditation help people realize that we are all one? And and then how can that lead us to creating a better future in terms of constructing buildings and cities that are conducive for our planet?
This idea of the assemblage is so brilliant. I really think it's one of the most brilliant ideas, and I have to again congratulate Rodrigo for doing this, because this could be a movement of living in presence, living in that experience of being. Meditation is misunderstood. Most people, even the word mindfulness is incorrect. Okay, it implies a full mind, right? The awareness of a thought is not a thought, right? The awareness of an emotion is not an emotion. You are aware of emotions and thoughts. Awarefulness is a kind of a clumsy word, so we won't use it, but when we say meditation, it means self-reflection. Who am I? Who wants to know who am I? What is it that wants to know? What is my purpose? Why do I exist? What is the deepest desire I have for myself, for humanity? And questions like that. In the Indian tradition, they're called Atma Vichar, questioning the self, self-inquiry. So that's one form of meditation. The other is what is these days called awareness, or mindful awareness. Awareness of your body is an experience. Awareness of what's happening inside your body, which is called pratyahara. These days it's called interoception. Awareness of mental space. Awareness of the web of relationship. And then ultimately, awareness of awareness, which is transcendence. If this could become our mode of living in the world, not just, taking 20 minutes to recite a mantra, which is very good also, but living from the center of our being, which actually has no center. There's no center for any experience. If I asked you, where is this experience happening? A physicalist, if I hit you here, where is this experience happening? If I pinch you here, is it happening here? Is it happening in my brain? Or is it happening in my consciousness? You know the answer. It's happening in consciousness. Without consciousness, this experience is impossible. Where is this consciousness? It has no center. It can't be localized. It transcends space-time. But our problem is we can't imagine that which transcends space-time, because all our imagination is based on experiences in space-time. You have to transcend that. You have to go beyond thought. Rationality will never get us there if you don't even know where the thought comes from. Okay? Because all our thought is the conditioned mind. We recycle everybody else's thoughts. None of our thoughts are original. They don't belong to you. So next time you have a troubling thought, say, don't belong. Next. Okay, you have to go to the center of your being, which has no center, which is infinite. And your infinite, formless, timeless, eternal being cannot be squeezed into the volume of a body or the span of a lifetime. Infinity cannot be contained by its contents. Infinity cannot be limited by its contents. Mind, brain, body, universe, these are the contents in consciousness. And what is consciousness? It's that which makes every experience possible. Whether it's a thought, a feeling, an emotion, a sensation, it's the knowing element in every experience. Consciousness is that in which this experience is happening, occurring in that in which this experience is known, but ultimately that out of which this experience is made, whether it's the body, the mind, or the universe. Human constructs.
I agree with you. The assemblage is brilliant. However, I spend a lot of my time here, and I find myself to be totally in sync with humanity and being very happy most days. And then when I leave the building and go into the subway, I see the number of homeless people rising and people literally walking down the train tracks wanting to end their lives. It's a grim situation out there, and Mo states that 1 in 4 people are suicidal. And I noticed in places like South Korea and Seoul, after having lived in Nepal for 7 years, going on an inward journey, I went to Seoul right afterwards, and it's a highly technologically advanced city, but people are, don't know how to interact with each other, and South Korea is has one of the highest suicide rates in the world. Can you explain, or I would love to hear your perspective of how technology and depression are correlated and what we can do to be more happy? What are some tools that you can share with everyone on how to be happier?
How do you want me to talk about this after what Deepak said?
I
Seriously. Yeah.
For example, like in Nepal, it's a very underdeveloped country, and they don't have things like clean drinking water at the turn of a faucet, but some of those people there are happier than anyone I've seen in New York.
So there are two sides to this. Suffering is real. Huh? Suffering is real. It happens. When you think about Nepal, or when you think about Syria, or when you think about what's happening for the homeless person around the corner, the first reaction you should have is to appreciate how amazing your life is. The fact that your boss is annoying or that your boyfriend is rude doesn't matter. Honestly, it does not count. It is not a reason for suffering, right? And the reality of the matter is, I think Deepak put it so elegantly, eloquently. Reality is, if you think about all spiritual teachings we've ever had, I call that ancient science. Huh? It's the way we looked at our being at a time where we were not distracted by so much noise, and we actually realized that for this being to stop suffering, there are things we can do, right? The main objective is to stop suffering. The number one objective for this physical journey, if you want, the journey that we take through the physical world, the physical form we live in, is to reduce. It's impossible to stop suffering, but it's to reduce the suffering, right? Beyond that physical form that we are, the single objective we have is compassion. You want to call it love, whatever you want, right? But the truth is, this is not the end of it. This is not the extent of who you are. For this form, let's try to stop feeling the suffering that we go through every day. But for the bigger than this form, which really does not exist, we need to find the compassion between us for this one being to operate. Now, I tend to become hyper practical about those things. So the only thing I really bring to the scene, if you want, is an hyper-engineered view of this, right? And I will say to everyone in this room, I don't know how many of you don't look like video gamers, are you? Any video? Oh, there you are. Yeah, there you are. Yeah, life is a video game. If you actually take everything that Deepak spoke about, just understand the following. Huh? We are a minute speck in an endless universe of which we know nothing at all. Right? Nothing at all. And yet we think we matter so much that we are so hyper focused on the last tweet by Donald Trump. Right? The reality is none of this matters at all. Now, if you want to go through this the right way, you do it like a video gamer. Now, the way video gamers play is very, very different. Number one, video gamers don't have an end to the game. There is no target. We don't play to finish the level. When you finish the level, the game is over. So, where's the fun in that, right? When you finish this level, you're gone. Where's the fun in that? The reason video gamers play is to play. This is what it's all about. It's to be here and now and enjoy and completely live in this moment. As you're going through the game, there are a few dead, enemies on the floor and dead friends on the floor, and a block that you missed if you're playing Tetris or whatever that is. You don't make that stop you from achieving the real objective of what this is all about. And what this is all about is we're here to experience this fully, to be conscious of this fully. Now, there is so much depth to understanding this that it becomes complicated. Truly, it is complicated. Happiness seems to be like even more difficult than diet, right? It's more difficult than getting fit, right? It's really weird when you think about it. When and the same is true for dieting. Huh? When you want to be fit, there are so many experts out there and personal trainers and diet experts and 14 million diets, and carbs is what matters, no, protein is what matters, and everyone makes it so complicated. At the end of the day, Deepak mentioned 5 for unhappiness. At the abstract level, I will say that all of unhappiness, and I think most religious and spiritual beliefs will say that, is because of what? Misknowing. It's really because we cling so much to the illusion we're living in, right? We look at every part of it as if it matters. You know what's the only thing that matters? That you have the compassion in you to connect to the rest of being. Simple as that. If you find that, if you see the reality that nothing else is real, nothing else matters, right? This becomes super easy. I break it down into hyper-engineered models, but today perhaps I actually think the level of this conversation is so much higher than just the practicalities of it. But the practicalities are super easy if you see the truth. And the truth is none of this exists. Right? The truth is the connection between you and I is the only thing that exists. And if we manage to get that right, everything flips upside down. Everything works.
That's a great answer. Thank you.
Should I add to that?
Yeah, I would love for you to add to that and what your truth is.
Yeah. So coming back to suffering, so then as you said, it begins with us at an individual level. I like to, in my work, I look at this transformational journey in a three-step process, beginning with our interpersonal transformation, which really begins with self-attunement, with an understanding, an honest, sincere, naked, raw acknowledgement of the fact that we are misperceiving our reality, that we have a very oftentimes calcified, rigid, static sense of self that we run around the world and try to uphold and care for and perpetuate, that most of the time we actually are not fully satisfied, we're not fully happy. We don't really ever arrive at that moment of equilibrium where we can say, oh, this is it. And if we have a little glimpse, then it's gone. Like you were saying, just as you utter a word, it's past, it's gone. So that moment of, those transient moments of happiness or equilibrium are transient. They leave. And maybe just becoming really intimate with those realities is the dawn of realism. And spirituality, or the path of evolving, from my understanding, is just becoming more and more realistic. It's not about bypassing reality to adopt some kind of spiritual persona or live in some kind of bliss realm and pretend we're semi-enlightened and we're all, multi-orgasmic and cosmically orgasmic and drink elixirs and think that we're done because now we live in community and it's all beautiful and we go to Burning Man. It's not. We're all shitting ourselves when we're in Burning Man. We're all unhappy. We all have interpersonal dysfunctional relationships because our boyfriend looked at some hot topless chick in Burning Man. We all worry about where we... No. Funny, actually, topless chick, he was just published in a French Vogue in the middle of an article full of topless French girls, and they recommended sunbathing topless for women and reading his book. It's so funny. He was apologizing. They were like, to be happy this summer, you have to sunbathe naked, you have to do Ayurvedic diet, and read his book. Exactly. And that again points to this fundamental misunderstanding that happiness is something to pursue, rather than something that is arrived at as a way of negation, by way of negation, by way of eliminating the causes that keep us from perceiving our reality, that keep us from having a transcendent experience of self or non-self, that causes that keep us from understanding that my sense of self is merely conceptual, and in fact, I am not just this sack of, what did you call it, skin? This sort of skinified ego situation, but rather my sense of self extends beyond the skin and is including all of this life in front of me and all of the other living beings, and that sense of subjective, expanded subjectivity actually is the cause of bliss. That is the cause of bliss. When we have little glimpses of transcending our sense of self, those are the moments we have true orgasm. Those are the moments when we are so relieved from this weight of self and the fear and the clenching and the tightness of self. Those little glimpses of transcending the self. So, coming back down on the ground again to suffering, it all begins. I wish we didn't have suffering and we didn't have to talk about suffering. We could just be happy and experience perpetual joy and bliss, but the reality is we don't. We might have a taste of it, a hint of it here, but when we go out, like Susanna said, we have our interactions and we remember the amount of money that's in our bank account, and we remember the job we have to go to tomorrow that we're not happy to go to, and all of those things. So it begins with a raw, naked, unapologetic, fierce, courageous acknowledgement of the fact that we are not home yet, and that we are exiled from home. That whether we have exiled ourselves or some other being has exiled ourselves, that's a philosophical discussion for another time, but we're not there. And maybe just by acknowledging that and stopping to compensate, stopping to pretend we're there, and upholding that, which is just so much stress on a daily basis, to pretend we're there when we're all just little hurting children, all that stuff. So I'm talking from a coach perspective, and I hope I'm not boring you, but it starts with that. And that's really the birth of compassion. It's when you acknowledge your suffering, and when you understand that you're vulnerable, and that you want happiness, and all of us want happiness, and none of us want to suffer. And when you allow your heart to feel that desire for happiness, when you grant yourself permission to really attune to that wish for happiness in your own being, I think that is a little glimpse of compassion. And on a neurological level, you begin to develop the neural networks, you begin to strengthen perhaps the insula, you perhaps begin to integrate certain brain regions that allow you to then extend that self-compassion or that compassion to other beings. Because then when you relate to your own unhappiness and suffering like a good mother, would relate to her child, you begin to also intuitively see the suffering and unhappiness in others. And you have more, what would you call it, like mind sight, theory of mind, depth of field, perhaps? And you relate to beings in a much more skillful way. You begin to understand that they too have needs, and they too are complex beings with a desire to not suffer. And then you communicate and you act in a way that's more skillful. And little by little, you create the causes that over time yield the result of happiness, which is really the definition of wisdom. Wisdom is you want something, i.e. you want happiness, then take action that corresponds with the result. So it's really simple. And I think that the more aware we become, and as you said, the more conscious we become, the more we slow down, the more we attune, the more we breathe, the more we do these practices that have been given to us from these incredible ancient wisdom traditions, the more we start to integrate these, the more we start to trust the right hemisphere functions, our intuition, our sense of awe, our sense of imagination, our feeling, all of these, perhaps we can find a way out of the situation.
Beautiful. Thank you. We have one question from the live stream, and I want to open up the space for the audience to field any questions. But I'll start with Murphy. How does one reconcile awakening to understanding mindfulness and awareness with the need to relate to others, particularly family and friends that may not have undergone transformation? How do we make sense and balance the experience of life and also the need to analyze, think, and react in today's modern world?
I'll take that on quickly. I always advocate the concept of attend to yourself first before you help others. You know what they tell you on aeroplanes, right? So attend to yourself first before you help others. And I know what I say sounds harsh sometimes, but you have to remember what you owe family members, what you owe friends, what you owe others is different from one person to another. So your best friend for life deserves from you more than the friend that you met yesterday. Your parents deserve a lot more than someone that you are a colleague with at work, right? And having said that, attend to yourself first before you help others. If you want to really be good to your parents, I'm talking about parents because this is truly, in my view, the closest bond. You owe them love, care, and respect. You understand that? So love, care, and respect are not necessarily an ingredient for your unhappiness at all. So when you integrate with people outside you, sometimes if they're constantly bringing you down, you have to start finding a way to say, I owe you love, care, and respect. And I always cite the story of my son Ali. My daughter Aya, by the way, is here in the audience today, which makes me very proud. And that's the reason for my sneakers, because she's a sneakerhead. Anyway, so Ali's mother would always go to him and say, Ali, would you do A, B, and C for me? And he would say, no, Mama, I really don't feel like it. And she would sort of insist until he would say, okay, Mommy, look, I'm not going to do it, but I love you. Right? And every time he said that, she would literally melt down and say, it's okay, Habibi, you don't have to do it. Right? And really, when you think about it, in an interesting way, I really want to go back to the point of we are in charge. As individuals, the first thing we have to do is we have to really make this complete. We have to make this whole before we volunteer to help others. And if others are taking away from that, you have to be very protective. That's number one. Number two is one of the main reasons why I believe Solve for Happy was the success that it was, is it wasn't a book about happiness. It was really a book about success while you're happy. Now remember the following. The lie that we were given as children was that success was more important than happiness. And that happiness is the tax you have to pay to get to success. Right? And that's total crap. It's totally unfounded. You were born happy, you're supposed to be happy. This is your healthy state of operation. So when you start to catch the flu a little bit, you wake up and you say, oh my God, I'm catching the flu, I need to do something about it. The same is true for happiness, right? When you start to feel unhappy, you have to have the same feeling. Something's wrong, I need to do something about it. Most of us don't do that. the trick is the following. The trick is every single one of us is here to contribute to that being that we all are. There is something in this gameplay that's about each of us clicking the controller in a specific way to add something to the game, right? We should engage with the modern world fully. And I actually will say to the people in this room that one of the biggest mistakes with our world today is that the good people are not in position of power. You understand? It's your absolute duty to succeed. It's your absolute duty to gain influence, to gain power, to gain a network, to gain wealth, but never to let that own you. Because once it owns you, you're gone. You're chasing it for the rest of your life. If once again, if you play like a gamer, you detach from the game and you say, I'm here to do the absolute best that I can, right? To make the world a better place, like Paulo Coelho will say, the entire universe will conspire to make your life better. Now, we all started to forget this because they taught us that the way we go through life is through a business plan and a spreadsheet and personal gain and possessions and material stuff and so on and so forth. None of that matters. What really matters is that you will be put in situations on a daily basis. Those situations can make you unhappy or make people around you unhappy. Can be, can make you happy or make people around you happy. And the choices that you make as an individual to continue to succeed in life are really simple. You prioritize your happiness, you prioritize the happiness of others, and everything else will fall in place. Does that mean, my happiness is not to show up at work tomorrow? Is that what I should do? No. Your happiness is to show up at the right work in the future. So if you start searching for the right work, it may take you 6 months, it may take you a year and a half, but you'll be moving in the right direction so that you continue to work and succeed and make your life better and make the lives of others better. But at the same time, you're doing that with happiness as your number one priority. You're not interviewing for $15 extra a month. You're interviewing for a better place to work that makes you happy and rewards you for the work that you do spiritually, that you feel that you're contributing. And one of the things that had made a massive difference for me in my career to become, the chief business officer of Google X was that I never really, I really saw the reality very early on that $100 more doesn't make a lot of difference. $1,000 more doesn't make a lot of difference. What makes a lot of difference is that you show up at a place that makes the world a better place. And if you do that every day, and if you're not doing it today, don't resign tomorrow, right? Just start moving in that direction. There are so many places today that truly want to make our world better. Right? Start moving in that direction. Start moving to a place that makes you happy, that appreciates you, and eventually you'll end up in the right place.
I like the point about helping good people get to a place of influence, and I see Anahita playing this role in helping to guide those who want to make a difference in the world. And also being the chief mindfulness officer at a company like Y2X, where you created these alpha filters that helps the company determine which startups to fund and incubate that would then create more access to basic human needs and have sustainable outcomes. So I think that's really important. Do you have anything to add? And then we'll open it up to some questions.
Yeah, just you mentioned the alpha filter. So this organization that I work with, Y2X, has these 5 alpha filters. So these are determining sort of filters that allow certain projects to funnel into the organization that then get incubated or funded and help with that get support in terms of strategy. On a massive scale. And these are usually projects that have the potential to affect 1 billion people or more. So we're looking at assets of need mainly. And some of these filters are that the organization or the projects that we bring on are socially responsible, that the leaders of these organizations or these projects are mindful, they're ethical, they have ethical guiding principles that determine their actions and their investment portfolio choices. So, and I definitely am in charge of overseeing the minds of the people in the organization, because an organization can be said to have a mind as well. The culture of an organization is in a way the mind of the organization. And it's made up of little minds, and the little minds are the minds of the people that run it. So my job is to oversee that people are embodying the values that they have, that we have determined at the beginning, the core principles, and that this doesn't become yet another sort of transplanting of the old economical paradigm into this new sort of, what would you call it, blockchain governed ecosystem that promises to solve all of the world's problems. At the end of the day, you know, karma is real. We just take it with us. We can't just shake it off. You know, karma meaning action, and actions yield, you know, consequences, reactions. We can't just shake it off because blockchain has knocked at our door. We're going to just transplant all of those patterns, all of those unconscious behavioral patterns, that worldview, that's going to just perpetuate. In fact, it's just going to create some kind of hyper-capitalism, which is like AI gone bad. So, you know, it already has in ways. So we really are responsible to make sure that as technology evolves or grows exponentially, that there are the good and bad, again, categories, but the ones who aspire to do good in the world take their places in these organizations and accompany these leaders that are making these huge pivotal decisions on behalf of humanity, making sure that they make the right choices, that they are attuned, and that they are relative, to some extent, mindful. And so, yeah, that's what I've sort of signed up for.
And thank you for doing that. You know, a lot of people will say that Wall Street is like evil, et cetera, but I mean, we have to work with people in Wall Street. Who's gonna help guide them in the right direction if no one puts their hand out?
In fact, in Buddhism, they say the bodhisattva, so the being that I mentioned earlier on, goes into the heart of darkness, does not shy away from going into where the ignorance is the thickest, where unhappiness is the most sort of, what would you call it, palpable. So it's not about creating bubbles where we separate ourselves from them and further perpetuating the us and them divide. It's about having the compassion to see that their suffering is perhaps far greater than ours, if we can make such a bold statement. And then actually helping, rather than just taking care of our own happiness and our own bliss and our own evolution. Fun and parties. It's not to leave a single being behind. No exceptions.
The weapons of mass distraction, which I love that terminology that I read in your book.
But I mean that in a very serious way. I mean, this is the heart of it all, right? And you're at the heart of it all, and you're the heart of that heart. And I honestly and truly believe if we manage to transform this place, we transform the whole world. And I truly believe this is your responsibility. I say that with love and respect. And honestly, it really is all about what matters. Is what matters another get-together, another party, another $1,000, another suit? Really, the question is, can we live with the life that we've created any more than this? And I honestly tell you, your path to changing the world is to seek your own happiness. It's as simple as that. Is to tell yourself, I'm going to prioritize my happiness as my #1 priority. I'm going to change over time and be an example, and then find the ultimate joy of making others happy. Because there is no happiness that beats making other people happy. I tell you, I feel that every day, right? And I know it sounds like a bad executive here giving you a quota, but I am giving you a quota. If this world was to change, it's going to be because of you. And honestly, if you don't do it, yeah, I think this place is the place where it should change. Maybe the assemblage, this exact spot, is where everything should change.
How do you define happiness? And is that to say that stuff, not being happy is not good? And does anyone have any questions? So I'm supposed to start from this side. On the left and the right?
Okay. mostly for Deepak, but anyone else, because it's a little idealistic, but let's say we use happiness as a baseline for being, where we all start from. And evolution happens in leaps, punctuated evolution. So what is that evolutionary step that we can all look forward to as we become that society of happiness? Instead of working for it, let's say it's there. What's the next leap?
So, first define happiness. Well, happiness is a complicated thing. If you're happy for a reason, that's misery. Because the reason can be taken away from you anytime. What is innate to us is joy. And all you have to see is a baby to see what joy is. The baby is joyful for no reason because it's playful and has wonder and curiosity and feels connected. Now, philosophically, the next step, which you asked, is all suffering, and I mentioned the 5 kleshas, comes from the illusion of the separate self. There is no such thing. Next time you're feeling unhappy, ask yourself, who am I thinking about? Okay? And start to think about somebody else. The easiest way to be happy is to make somebody else happy. Fastest way to be happy is to make somebody else happy. And you do that by giving them attention, which means listening to them, affection, which means you care for them, appreciation, you notice their good qualities, and acceptance, you don't try to change them, period. And if there's one formula, it would be first love and then be spontaneous. That's it. Love and then be spontaneous.
From that idea of joy, when you look into a baby's eyes, and understand through technology and modern civilization that we're decreasing infant mortality, decreasing mother's mortality at birth, we're also increasing livelihood as a whole. How does that work into a natural order where we're replicating more, we're living longer, and how are we taking versus giving into systems?
The mathematics of it are not what we think of it at all. I mean, our planet is abundant in resources. If you think about any of the resources we have, energy is abundant. Energy in oil isn't, right? If we think about the way we are, can our planet sustain 7 billion more people? Of course. But with the abuse we're putting on our planet, it cannot. And the abuse, by the way, is a direct result of what Anahita was talking about, is that the left brain, our left brain centricity, is separating my own benefit from the benefit of all being. So if I can make another $1 million by destroying the planet a little bit, that's okay, because I'm not part of that planet. What matters is me. It's a hyper-Western approach of individualism. So our challenge is not scarcity. Our life is abundant. Our challenge is abuse. So everything, when we talk about defining happiness, I would say happiness is the absence of unhappiness, right? Really, if you remove unhappiness, what's left behind is happy. Prosperity is the absence of abuse. If you look at the world today, there is 1 billion people that are obese and 1 billion people that are undernourished. We have enough to feed everybody if we don't throw the corn in the oceans, and if we don't have trade barriers and land laws that make people who can farm not farm. You understand? So from a physical point of view, we can sustain the planet. From a psychological point of view, however, I actually don't think we can anymore. So one of the big challenges we have is technology always magnifies humans' abilities. So you and I can, I think, walk at 8 kilometers an hour, maybe run at 40 kilometers an hour, the fastest person on earth. You get in a car and we can go 200, 250 miles an hour. And now all of our problems are being exaggerated by the massive amount of technology that we're putting in our own hands. And so you take things like social network. When you and I growing up, we used to be bullied by two kids in school. Now every child is bullied by 200 kids, right? And all of that is making it so difficult for us to sustain all of this. Still, not because of scarcity. It's because of abuse.
Reframe the question. Really, totally understand that side. And maybe the question, and the beauty is that we can reframe these questions and these conversations, is what if we look at the evolutionary speed of technology versus the evolutionary generational side of our own DNA? And are they in sync?
Oh. No, they're not. Not at all. So they're moving much faster than we are. Deepak, when we were in the room in there, was talking about AI and the evolution of that. And I probably think it would be wonderful if you share some of that. I think it was spot on. The reality is that we define ourselves as a being that's made of this, right? Machines, as I know them, as I've built them, are a being. They are some form of a being, right? And that being is evolving. It's evolving at a speed that is totally out of sync with our speed, right? And the reality is that there is one of two scenarios. There is a scenario where that being becomes separate from us. We consider it one more of the enemies, right? We consider it another one, us and them, us and them. Or we can actually look at it as a being. And the biggest examples of success with AI today, you look at chess, for example. The world chess champion is a machine. It's been a machine for 20 years, I think, right? But the championships now are a human and a machine together, right? Is there a way that we can integrate that being into our life? And Deepak spoke about that beautifully in there. Can we integrate this into our life somehow so that our DNA and their DNA evolves together? Can we all evolve together? Can we evolve by giving animals a better life? That approach of us, not us and them, us as a whole evolving and becoming better, right? So, Deepak, AI.
I don't exactly remember what I said, but the AI that we create reflects our values. So AI can be divine, it can be diabolical. Like anything else, you go on the internet, it reflects the human condition, everything, right, from divine to diabolical, and everything in between. AI, I don't believe, can be fully conscious. It can simulate consciousness, because consciousness is not a biological phenomenon, in my opinion. Consciousness is fundamental reality that transcends space-time. But once we create AI, it feeds back on our conscious being. So it depends on how we create this collectively. It depends on these conversations a lot. The more these conversations expand and reach critical mass, the more likely we are to create technologies that will hopefully move us in the direction of a more peaceful, just, sustainable, healthier and joyful world. But right now what we have is the modern capacities of immense power and tribal minds that go back to the Bronze Age. Our emotional intelligence, our spiritual intelligence has not evolved since the Bronze Age. We'd like to romanticize this, India, Buddhism, Vedanta, but you count these people, there are a handful of people. Most of them anonymous. We look at Greek civilization, we think of Parmenides and Plato and Socrates and Pythagoras, a handful of people. Today, for the first time, there is the opportunity that these handful of luminaries could be critical mass, could be 1 billion people. That would change the world.
Can you guys hear me? Oh, certainly can. So I heard amazing, and I could spend an hour saying thank you, so I'll do it succinctly. A lot of really eloquent versions of the setup with a punchline that was therefore love and compassion. In a world where all of us, as we know ourselves, will go away, and on a long enough timeline, it's a race to absolute zero. Can you defend that answer? Why does it matter? What's the difference in 100 billion years between a compassionate life and a terrible life in a universe where eventually all of us no longer exist? And the atoms that sit here in a world of pollution or a world of hugs are the same atoms either way.
The answer is upgrade the illusion in the vivid now in the lucid dream. That's it. It's more enjoyable. The play is better for you. The outcome in the end is that which we call reality will never go away. You're talking about heat death of absolute zero. Well, that was what the universe started as. As of now, if you believe the current scientific model, there are 10 to the power of 500 universes. And probably 60 billion habitable planets in our own galaxy. Consciousness cannot help but being conscious. And it is conscious of itself as the other, as this world, as the knowing of the self. The self interacts with itself to create this. And this is the play of consciousness. I don't believe the heat death of absolute zero, the singularity, is the end. It's just the end of a cosmic dream. Till it recycles again into dreaming.
What will go is not you. What will decay is not you. That's the answer, right? So if you're again, I don't know why this today is video games. So I'll talk video games again. If you're a video gamer, if you're the avatar on the screen in the video game, you think it's a disaster. You think that the game is eventually going to end. Whether I win or lose or the electricity cuts, the game is going to end. But you're not the avatar. You're not the avatar. You'll never end. And this is not a spiritual view, by the way. I explain it in details and so for happy. If you combine the Big Bang Theory, quantum physics, and theory of relativity in a very, very clear way, you realize that this is not life. This physical form is not life. This physical form, for it to exist, for you to exist, life has to observe it. Life is outside all of it. Life exists outside space-time. What will decay is not you. You never really die. Now, if that is the definition you want to use, if you're in the game, what you're trying to do is to become the absolute best gamer you can become. That's your only objective. You're playing. And as you're playing, it doesn't matter if you win the game or lose the game. What matters is you play the game. Right? At the end of the game, there is no end. At the end of the game, you put the controller down and you go on to play another game. It's as simple as that.
And may I add to why compassion? Let's go to the metaphysical for a moment. If the gateway to liberation and genuine lasting happiness is through the heart, right? As all the poetry and the spiritual traditions allude to, the gateway is heart. The gateway is attunement to something very deep, something very intrinsic, that all of us probably have tapped into at some moment, or are currently in tune with. If that is true, then compassion is almost a spontaneous extension of that innate state. To be able to attune to that heart, symbolic heart, inevitably will lead to us removing the filters that are obscuring our vision, our perception. painting an image, a picture of a world which seems to be in control, seems to be certain, seems to be organized, when it's actually all falling apart, when there's so much suffering. So when that filter is removed and we really see, unobstructed, then it is an inevitable consequence of that seeing that compassion is born. Then compassion becomes spontaneous, and compassion becomes almost a play, in a response, a natural response to the condition that we're in. So it becomes automatic. It's a reflex, you know? But that might sound poetic. It's something that can only be known through experience and not through theoretical understanding. Because when you see fire, in that sense, if you see suffering, there is you have no choice but to want to put it off. You have no choice but want to alleviate it. And I think that really, to be in that state deserves to be called a human being, a being that's in that state.
Isn't suffering though part of the decay?
No. The question was, isn't suffering part of the decay? No, suffering is the challenge you get through the game to gain skills. So if a game that starts and then you push the controller forward for 70 years and end the game is not a game. You don't learn anything, right? Suffering is there to give you reason to become a better gamer, right? And as you become a better gamer, to become a better gamer for what? For that person holding the controller, not for the avatar to purify and improve and be better. So the whole. I don't know if you've ever. I'm sure you have. If you've ever been in a movie theater, beautiful big screen, incredible sound system, and you get completely absorbed into the movie, right? 2 hours pass by in a second, and you're completely in it, but you're not in the movie. You're out there. That's exactly what's happening to us in this physical form. In this physical form, you're so absorbed in the drama. But the reality is that you're not this. The drama is to purify the real you, is to make the real you play and understand and become a better gamer, right? Now, if you think of suffering as a bad thing, is it really? If you're absolutely right in your question, if this physical form is decaying, it's a zero-sum game. Why is suffering bad? What difference does it make? What difference does it make if I have 5 fingers or 4? If someone pokes an eye, who cares? It's not really me, right? You care because that's the way you evolve in this game. That's the way you learn. That's the way, by specific rules of the game that wants you to avoid that suffering, you're becoming a better being, not a better person. You're becoming a better being. You're connecting to the rest of us sitting on the sofa out there, each of us holding another controller.
I just wanted to say thank you. I could ask you a million questions, but I'm very confused, which is actually a wonderful statement.
One more question.
I guess I'll try to be really succinct. And I want to kind of actually start by the end, which was his comment kind of prompted in me. Let's see. Okay, so I think also from his question, I think what's important to remember is that in this universe which we know nothing about, and in which we feel we have very little control over, we have a certain kind of control, which is free will, right? It's like, so the way that I see it, it's, you have a city, by example, in which that city you have all these roads, and you can choose to take this one, you can choose to take this one. So within that, you have certain amount of free will, and within that choice, then certain different events or landscapes or environments and things happen. I think free will is important also because in that universe in which we have no control and we feel so hopeless for, it gives us meaning and it gives us a certain empowerment. And in that empowerment, we get to steer a life and the environment that we interact with and shape into the direction that we want. That direction can be negative or that direction can be positive. But it's within that choice and within that responsibility and the action to do it that we actually manifest whatever is within and without us. And I think in itself, if we come from a human consciousness where we see suffering, we see why we should do something and why we should not, then in itself it is a key. Because by taking over what we have the control of, it gives us self-validation and purpose, which fulfills us as a human being. To that, I want to touch about to suffering, because I think suffering is optional. I think pain is not, and it's part of life, but I think suffering is optional. I think suffering is our inability to let go of the experiences or event that happens to us and that we label as negative. And that labeling is a conditioning of the mind, right? And so I think that freedom and salvation in this instant comes from first awareness, as Deepak you mentioned, and it's that detachment from what is happening as something that we identify with, but just as something that is. And then from that detachment, that awareness, it's acceptance. And then from that acceptance, it just things are as they are. And then we can't go ahead with the belief that we're never going to suffer because we're this, or because we're enlightened, or that we're never going to feel pain because we're this or that. No, life happens. Sometimes we experience things because we have not expected them to be a certain way, because we have a certain perception of what we think is going to bring us happiness, are causing us suffering. Or sometimes things are painful, like someone's death, or like a breakup. And that process of grief is painful, but that's okay. And I think if we accept that that's okay, then we can learn from it. And we can learn from the positive or the negative, which the negative is just the other opposite of the positive. And then from then on, it creates space. And then from that space, the infinite possibilities can actually happen. So that was kind of like my kind of a 2 cents that I wanted to bring, and kind of building up all the connections that you brought. And then I kind of want to like leave it with a question, which is kind of about AI. And another man who asked about the pace at which artificial intelligence evolved and in which our own evolution. And what I like us to kind of like bring it to give us a context is, let's talk about social media, Instagram, and let's bring it back to a very like linear perspective. It only happened 5 years ago, Instagram, and now in 5 years, how much of us not only is addicted to it, how much of it rewiring the brain has it done because of the repetition of our experience and engagement with it, and also how much has it changed in business, in health and wellness, and fitness, and the representation of yourself, and the way we engage with it. And then I guess where I want to take it is moving so fast. Sorry. It is moving so fast that it is actually controlling us. And in that way, is AI actually already ahead of us?
And on top of that, I would love to end with a question: how do we leverage technology to create more happiness in the world? Happiness and peace.
So AI is not controlling you, Instagram is not controlling you, nothing's controlling you at all. You choose to be controlled. You choose to be controlled, right? The reality, unfortunately, is that as long as we continue to buy the next iPhone because it's fancier than the last iPhone, Apple is going to make more fancy phones, right? Until we insist to say, I'm not upgrading my iPhone 6. I am on an iPhone 6, by the way, right? And until we insist and say we're not upgrading it, until you give me a tool that makes my life better, not just fancier, but better, right? They're going to make that the case. I always make the comment and say, Hollywood is not controlling you. As long as you choose to watch violent movies where people point guns to other people's heads and pull the trigger and your heart doesn't change, Hollywood's going to make more of them, right? If we all stop watching them, they're going to make more comedies, right? We are at the dawn of an age where each of us is in full control. What you vote with is your time, your attention. If you choose and say, that's it, iPhone 6 until I get a better phone. That's it, comedy, and I'm not watching violence, right? right? And it's very simple. No Instagram. If you don't, I have tools on my phone that will block my WhatsApp after 24 minutes of use every day. I choose 24 for some reason, right? But now, so no one is in control. You are in control. And you started your conversation by saying happiness is a choice. So is it difficult to deal with technology today because it's very addictive? Of course, Anahita would talk about that, in her trainings for hours, and the dopamine addiction that we get to switch on our phones every 2 seconds to look for another message. But that doesn't mean they are in control, right? You can make a choice. And going back to Susanna's question, can technology be used to make us happier? No, nothing can make you happier. The only thing that makes you happier is to stop being unhappy, right? And the only way to stop being unhappy is to see the reality, the truth of life. Now, technology, on the other hand, is a double-edged sword. It's a tool. It's like a pencil. You can use it to scribble on a paper or to poke me in the eye. That's not the problem with the pencil at all, right? The problem with technology today is that we're using it addictively for the wrong reasons. Now, if we record this and we take Deepak's conversation at the beginning and we put it on the web, on social media, that's a wonderful use of technology to spread consciousness to the world, right? And in a very interesting way, what I'm asking all of us, and I start with myself, I'm not an expert at this. I use tools on my phones to measure and monitor and reduce and become better and better. But we need to start telling ourselves, is this thing that's coming into my life helping me or poisoning me? Right? And that applies to technology, it applies to the Friday night party, it applies to the night you woke up not remembering how you ended up there, it applies to all of that. Right? And you have to start asking yourself, is this adding to my life or taking away from my life? Is it adding to everyone else's life? Because remember, this gathering today may be remembered as the gathering where you took charge and changed the world. Right? Is it adding to everyone else's life around me? Or is it taking away from everyone else's life? And I think these are all choices that we have to start to make.
I'd just like to comment on the whole idea of free will. Most people don't exercise free will. They're bundles of conditioned reflexes constantly being triggered by people and circumstance into predictable outcomes. If you want to exercise free will, then you have to be aware of yourself having an experience and aware of yourself making a choice. And there's a word for this these days, they call it metacognition. Aware of yourself having this experience and aware of yourself making a choice is the highest intelligence, is to observe yourself without judging yourself. Then spontaneously things happen. Love, compassion, joy, creativity, all that happens.
Yeah, I love this. I'm going to have to add to this. I mean, this is exactly what it's all about. To have free choice, you have to be free. And to be free, you have to really recognize all of the things that you go through in your life that take away from your freedom. Because we're not free. In reality, most of us are so hyper-conditioned in the way we do everything that we're not free at all. I think this is your area of it.
Just one last thing I'll say. I thought it was what you pointed out about suffering. Beautiful that it's a choice. For as long as we are choosing to suffer, perhaps then we can choose to suffer a little more lightly. Maybe we can relate to our suffering a little more spaciously. You used the word space also, which I thought was very on point. So maybe the journey until we become conscious of ourselves being conscious and until we actually eliminate the causes for unhappiness, maybe until then we can relate to our own suffering in a way that perhaps is a bit more skillful. Maybe we can hold our suffering lighter. Maybe we can hold our suffering in a way that just allows it to be there for what it is, understanding that it is a response to something that is probably not real. So that spaciousness, that humor, that playfulness, that not taking things too seriously while still being concerned and still being engaged. So not disengaging, not caring, right? A lot of people tell me, so maybe it's because that's absolutism, to say nothing exists and this is just all an illusion and that something else is real. This is also real. So for as long as we're here, and if I pinch myself, it hurts, and if he, cheats on me, it hurts, and if he punches me in the face, it hurts. If my mother... I'm just saying, these are the realities, but I can't control them. They're gonna pop into existence, and I can't control them. So all I can control is how I respond. So if I respond to the suffering a little more spaciously, a little bit more kind, if I can become kinder with my own suffering, and kinder with the suffering of others, maybe then it becomes easier.
Thank you. Thank you all so much. I think we're 15 minutes past the schedule of closing this conversation, but thank you all for coming out and choosing happiness as a priority, and all of you for joining tonight, and the Assemblage for hosting this event. I think Erin wants to give a closing thought.
Just quickly, the bar will be open. There's food available upstairs. And then Anthony is available if you guys want to see more of the building. Such an honor to have all of you here tonight, and such an honor for you all to be here. Thank you so much. Enjoy your night.